Greetings to you all. My name is Samkele Mlambo. I am a maritime economics teacher at Mowat Park High School. So today we'll be doing a virtual lesson on intermodal transport systems. Now, you might be wondering, what is intermodal transport systems? Maybe some of you might know what is transports, and some of you might know what is systems. However, the key word here is intermodal, of which we will start by breaking it down for you. So if we break the two words down, intermodal, we are left with inter and modal, where inter is in between and modal is modes of. Okay, so now if we are to join them now and say intermodal, it will then suggest that it is in between modes of. Now, our topic is on intermodal transport systems. So if we are then to add transport on it, it would then suggest to us that we are dealing with moving things in between different modes of. Okay, so it's inter, in between, modal, modes of, intermodal, in between modes of. Now, when we are now looking at intermodal transport as a concept, it gives us two concepts here. There is now modes of transport and intermodal. Okay, so what are these modes of transport that we are dealing with here? Now, if we look at the definition of modes of transport, you can suggest that it is means or ways in which we transport something. Okay, and in our case, we are transporting cargo. So for us, it suggests that it is means or ways in which we transport cargo. Okay, transportation of cargo is moving cargo from point A to point B. Okay, so there are many ways in which we can transport cargo. We can use the road. Example, trucks. So you might have seen trucks on the road. Okay, we can use rail. Okay, and I'm sure you might have seen trains carrying some goods. Another way you might use sea, where we now have ships that transport our goods. And we can also transport our goods using pipeline. Okay, there is a system of pipeline that transport mostly your liquid bulk cargoes, but we'll get to the types of cargoes. Okay, you can also use the air. Okay, there are aeroplanes that are there to transport certain types of cargoes, and it differs. It depends on what type of cargo it is. However, these are modes in which, or means in which, we can transport cargo. So there are many factors we look at and in considering that. Okay. Now, so the system itself, intermodal transport system, would then suggest to us that it is the transportation of cargo using different modes of transport in which I've listed above, which is your road, your rail, your air, your sea, and the pipeline. Okay. Now, what are we transporting? What is it that we are transporting? Because it is important for us to understand before we transport as to what is it that we are transporting. So this takes us to the types of cargoes that are available for us to transport. Starting with, we have dry bulk. Okay, dry bulk in a form of minerals, and we have your grains. When you speak of minerals, we speak of your coals, your iron ores, etc. When you speak of grains, it's whatever is farmed from your commercial farms, be it rice, be it wheat, and can be harvested in large volumes. So those two fall under the category of dry bulk. Okay, and then we have liquid bulk cargoes. Those are cargoes that are on a liquid state, and an example of that would be crude oil. Sometimes you do know that there are petrochemicals, okay, like your petrols, your diesels, your paraffins. Those are also liquid bulk cargoes in which are transported as well. Okay, another type of cargo we have is containerized cargo. Okay, now containerized cargo can carry anything from your clothes to your electronic devices, anything that can be put inside the container and transported in a box, which is this container. Okay, that is containerized cargoes. Okay, we have general cargo. Okay, general cargo is any cargo that can be unitized and can be put into the ship in units, like for instance bags of rice, or we might have machines that can be put on a ship on a unit basis. Okay, also have automotives, of which others might argue it is general cargo, but this type of general cargo has wheels. Okay, it is wheeled, and there's a system in which we handle it. Since it has its own wheels, it cannot be picked up, it can be rowed. Okay, so your automotives would involve your cars, it will involve your buses, any cargo that has got wheels and that can use its own wheels to move. Okay, and lastly we have refrigerated cargo. Okay, refrigerated cargo is cargo that requires temperature controlling, meaning it must be kept at a particular temperature, be it low temperature or high temperature. And here we're talking about things like your fruits, your meats, anything that must sustain a particular temperature. So that is refrigerated cargo. Now, these are the different types of cargoes that we have, and these are the cargoes that we then normally transport using our various modes of transports that I have outlined before. Now, as we move on now, we look at this cargo now. We got to understand the source of this cargo. Where does it come from? Because for us to transport something, it needs to start somewhere and end somewhere else. Okay, meaning there is a start and the finish, the source and the destination. So it is important then to understand, where is this source, where does this cargo come from, and who uses this cargo, who needs this cargo, where is it going to? Okay, because that will give us an indication, that will give us an idea as to how are we then transporting it. What means must we use to transport this particular cargo? Because sometimes the distance is close, sometimes the distance is very far apart, sometimes even across the oceans to different continents. Okay, now let's start with the minerals. Minerals, remember I said that the minerals are your bulk cargoes, like your coals and your iron ores. Those are mined. They come directly from under the ground, and there is a huge mining industry that deals with that. Us in South Africa, we are also actively involved in mining. We mine various types of cargoes. We have coal that we get out of the ground. We have platinum in South Africa. We have gold in South Africa. We've got diamonds in South Africa. We've got iron ore. We've got various minerals in South Africa that we mine out. So that would be the source of this mineral that we are to transport. Okay, with your grains come from farms. Your big farms, more especially in the context of South Africa, you might find places like your Northern Cape, your inland north of KZN, where you find your large commercial farms that farm on a global scale. Okay, so those will be our farms that will then farm our crops, which will then yield our grains. Okay, and liquid bulk. Liquid bulk is also like crude oil. Crude oil also comes from under the ground. Okay, it is also mined. Okay, so the source of crude oil would then be mines. However, with your petrochemicals, it is refined. It comes from a refinery and then it needs to be transported, but we'll get to that much later. We have containerized goods. Remember, containerized goods are finished goods. Okay, these are goods that have been processed and then made into something else, into a product. Okay, and then boxed, packed and stuffed inside the container. Okay, so now these come from factories. These goods will be made in factories, be it your clothing factories, be it your electronics factories. They come from various factories and then they are grouped and boxed and stuffed inside containers. Okay, automotives, from car assembly plants. Now in South Africa, in Durban, we do have Toyota, and Toyota does assemble cars and give us finished cars. So automotives will normally come from car assembly plants or car manufacturing plants. Okay. And then finally, we've got refrigerated cargoes. Refrigerated cargoes also come from farms. If you look at our poultry, if you look at our meat, it will be farms, big farms that are farming those type of cattle, of which then will be then converted into cargo and then transported as refrigerated. Also with the fruits, if you go to Cape, Western Cape, they've got grapes, they've got wineries, okay, where they plant large amounts of grapes and then transport it abroad, okay, to be kept at a particular temperature. Now, maybe with the fruit issue, you might think, but why is it a big fuss? Because I'm sure all of us in the world will have fruits. In fact, not. Okay, there are certain regions of the world that are geographically not able to grow certain things. Like for instance, you look at the Middle East. By nature, it's very dry, and the vegetation there is not good. So they would consume a lot of fruits of which they don't have. So they would have demand for those types of fruits. And also, there are certain fruits that grow in other parts and not grow in others. So those types of fruits will then end up being transported on our ships to various destinations. Okay, so this was our sources of cargo in terms of now where normally does this cargo come from? So the next step is, where is it going to? Who needs this cargo? Because that is where our relationship starts. Okay, now, like for instance, if we look at coal. Coal is a mineral that is used on coal power stations that generates electricity. So coal is used all over the world to generate electricity. Well, in South Africa, we have Eskom, and we would say Eskom tries to generate electricity, but coal is a mineral that we have, and we can use it to generate electricity. Also, wheat. Wheat goes to factories. Factories that can produce various products, normally your cereals. Okay? Crude oil. Crude oil is used, goes to oil refineries where they will then process it or refine it to produce your petrochemicals, like your petrol, your diesel, your paraffin, and other chemicals. Okay? Clothing and textiles. Clothing and textiles are from your garments to your fabric. Okay, I included it both for a particular purpose, because with the clothes, finished clothes, they would go normally to your retailers, to your shops that sell to the general public, to the consumers. Okay, now there's a lot of demand of that in your shopping centers, in your towns, in your cities. So most of that cargo will be heading there. Okay, but your fabrics, your textiles would go to factories where the garments would be produced. So it is possible that a textile comes from China in the Far East, heads to South Africa, and then processed into a product that is then shipped out to Madagascar. So now in this case, this fabric went from one area to another to be processed, and then went further to another area. So in this case, the destinations differ, but clothing and textiles also have their destinations, and it ends up being garments. Okay. Bags of rice. Okay. Bags of rice. Here we're not talking about your 10 kgs. We're not talking about your 1 kg bags of rice. We're talking about your 100 kgs, your 500 kg bags of rice, of which companies will then have to unitize that into your normal rice that you find in your supermarkets. So you get a lot of that imported in large volumes, mainly from your Far East. Okay. Automotives will go to your car dealerships, where we all go and then buy our cars. All right, and obviously fruits will end up in supermarkets. Now, Why is this important? Why are we explaining all this? Is because we are trying to establish a link and a coordination of this particular commodity or of this cargo from where it starts up until where it ends up. Okay, hence now let us look into this intermodal transport system. Now we are now tracking down a particular cargo from where it starts up until where it ends up, or up until where it ends up. Yes. Okay, so if you look at our diagram there, okay, there are stages in this intermodal transport system, or others might call it a supply chain. Others might say it's a value chain, where goods start from the source, they go inland to the port, at sea, at the port, inland, and then end up to its destination. And I will then take you through it. Okay, so firstly, the goods will start from the source, and we did mention what the source was. We mentioned the mine, we mentioned the farm, factories, we mentioned, yes, we mentioned some, yes, the mines. So this is where goods starts, okay? And from there, we package them and we put them into inland transport, okay? Now, inland transportation will then mean there are various modes in which we consider, because from inland, we can move goods by road, through our trucks, by train, by rail, through our trains, and by pipeline, okay? So depending on the type of cargo, we can then decide which out of these three are we using? Are we using truck, are we using train, or are we using the pipe? Also depending on the distance, okay? If it's a smaller parcel, we might consider road, but if it's a large shipment, we might consider rail. So there's a feasibility study that we conduct, but these are three options that could be available for us. And through the road, all our shipments will then head to the ports. A port is where we transfer cargo from the inland mode of transport to ships. Now, in this case, now we are now integrating the inland leg of the supply chain or of our intermodal system into the sea leg. We are transferring cargo from inland into the sea. Okay, because from the train, that particular shipment will then have to be loaded onto the ship. From the truck, that particular shipment will then have to be transferred into the ship. And we can only do that from a port, which others might call a seaport, where ships come to load and discharge cargoes. So that's our first step, and now we are loading the cargo into the ship, and we call that the port of loading. Then our ship will sail through the sea, across the ocean, and head to its destination. And in this case, maybe it might be the ship is leaving Durban, South Africa, and going to Sydney in Australia, which is across the Indian Ocean. So when our ship gets to Sydney, it will have to access Sydney through the ports, or through the porting system, where that cargo now needs to be transferred or discharged from the ship into the land. Okay, so the ship gets to our ports, which is the port of discharge, and from there it is then headed inland. It is then transferred inland through the various modes of transport that can be used inland, be it road, rail, or pipeline, all the way up until our cargo gets to its destination. Alright, so now we have now outlined the source to destination aspect of it from start to finish, the integration of cargo from when it starts up until where it finishes. Remember, the cargo will start from the source, it will go inland to the port where it will be loaded onto the ship. The ship will then sail to another port where the cargo will be discharged into the inland leg of the chain, which are modes of transport, all the way up until the cargo gets to its destination. So that's ladies and gentlemen, was an interpretation and an outline of what intermodal transport system is. Thank you.
Thank you.